Happy spring. It's the spring equinox today, March 20th. And we're boiling maple sap, and we're expressing a haiku that we're embodying on the farm. And the haiku goes like this: be so full of spring that the world's tough sweetness unfurls from your fingertips. And what better way to unfurl tough sweetness other than from our maple trees? I didn't introduce ourselves. I'm Bernie Ware, and this is my wife Sandy, and together we have made Ware Farm along with our parents, and now we're figuring out what we're going to be and do. We want to live and die in place and be put in place when the time's appropriate. And we're just super excited to be with our friends from Grow Benzie and Crosshatch. It's hard to notice, so some clutter has already disappeared, but it's really hard to notice because there's so much of it. Kind of like me, well-used equipment, and what do you do with it? And this year, my mom and my dad and I moved to the farm June 10th, 1950. So it'll be a 72nd anniversary for me on the farm. I left the farm in my youth and did other things for a while, from 17 to 30, low 30s, and always came back for strawberry season and helped, but came back to the farm full-time in the mid-80s. And now we're looking at decluttering, which there's quite a bit of clutter here. Some of the tools are still will go to other farmers, other businesses. Some of them we sell, some of them we give away, some of them we'll scrap. We're currently with a USDA contract to eliminate some invasive trees, Scots pine, which you can see out across the field. Autumn olive will be part of that eventually, and the tree of heaven. And we're also planting trees as we convert the farm into a more sustainable, regenerative forest is what we're looking at. That's what seems to make sense, the most sense to Sandy and myself, that the land becomes an old growth forest. We're not quite for sure on the name yet, but I'm advocating to change from Ware Farm. We drop the M off farm. It becomes Ware Far. And Ware in Middle and Old English, ware meant a vigilance, an awareness. Far is distance. in the distant. And maybe we become Ware Far forest. But we're not on consensus on that yet. Sandy thinks Ware Far sounds a little bit like warfare, or the spelling is close, but we're still working on that one. We're coming up on what I think is the oldest life form on the farm, this giant maple out in the middle of the field. I can remember my dad coming into the house and announcing, when I was pretty small, that the big maple that we're walking up toward was hit by lightning and it knocked the top of the tree off. So the tree doesn't really look that big until you get up to it. The land, through the working years, we were initially an industrial, conventional type farm. We had roughly producing 20 acres of asparagus, 25 acres of pickling cucumbers, and roughly 20 acres of strawberries. The farm, the land mass, is about 170 acres, and in 2018 we started caring for our elder parents, where we moved my dad right into the house, and we withdrew from farming, other than a small, relatively small garden. The tree, you can, as from this angle, you can kind of see right up in the center of the tree where the lightning had taken off the top of the tree. And this probably happened in the mid-50s. And all this used to be productive crop fields around the tree, so we worked around the tree for years and years and years. I always thought that 2 points, that always looked like the head of a dragon to me coming up out of the ground, so I named the tree Draconis a long time ago. The Gillespie family farmed this land. They were the homesteaders, and they started in 1866. The two brothers, one being a Civil War vet, and his other brother came to this part of Michigan, and they had adjoining properties. When my dad bought the farm, and Mom bought the farm in 1950, it was 283 acres, almost half a section. So we're in section 22 of Pleasanton Township. We're in the southern part of Pleasanton Township. Section 22. The tree is pretty massive, maybe twice as old as I am. Maybe more. I hope I never get to count the rings. We are walking into a place now of the edge of our hardwood forest that that has supplied thousands of logs for substrate for the shiitake mushroom. This is something we do every spring. We have for 20 years or so now. I go into the edges of the forest where the maples are small, they're growing pretty thick, and we thin the woods. We don't ourselves produce or sell that many mushrooms anymore. We're working with sometimes mentoring people to do that. I'll probably be doing some of that again this spring. And then also a collaboration going on with some local business that want to serve mushrooms with their food. I'm going to mark this tree here. You can see it's getting crowded. I'm going to put a ribbon on this one. Next week, we'll come in here, cut this tree down. And I didn't used to do this, but now when I kill anything, before I do it, I really think about it, and I make a commitment to this being that I'm going to use what they're giving me to serve others by producing or nutritious food and teaching others so that maybe other people will also serve others. And I make that commitment. My wife taught me about this, and this last winter I read a book by Susan Simard called Finding the Mother Tree. And Susan Simard's a scientist from British Columbia who's done a lot of work in the forests of British Columbia, but has proven that trees communicate with each other, and through the mycelium of the mycorrhizal fungi that's in the forest, all over the world, and then actually it's in the soil all over, as long as the soil is left in more natural condition, not too much tillage, maybe not too much chemistry, fungicides and such. But there's a relationship that goes on between the mycorrhizal fungal organism, and the mycorrhizal lives on the root of the land-based plant in a symbiotic relationship with whatever plants it's living with. The technology of science has evolved, so some of this can be measured now and proven that there's this beautiful symbiosis going on in the forest, and everybody is kind of growing together. What a beautiful thing. Hear the sandhill? The birds are all coming back. Red-winged blackbirds, robins, sandhill cranes. Our trees in the yard play host to the starlings, as we do all of them. roughly we've got about 50 acres of both hardwood forest and some wetlands with predominantly hemlock, yellow birch, and other trees associated with the wetlands. What we saw this past winter is an indication of how the winter used to be. My neighbors tell me that grew up in Detroit, they said this is just like a Detroit winter when we grew up in the 80s. The Grabowski brothers, Jim and Gerard. And so oak, hickory, some other diversity will add to the forest. I'm told that, you know, there is some value in these maples here, not so much here, but further back where we find some bigger ones. I'm told that half the veneer maple that's harvested east of the Mississippi is exported. To me, that seems gross. I'm sorry. With the need for carbon sequestration that we need to preserve as much as we can mature trees that are really doing a lot of work for us. I'm not saying we'd never take a tree out of here. When there's a need for a tree or a need for some lumber, we come out, take that tree when we have a use for it. That just seems to make more sense. All of us worked here, my mom, my dad, Sandy's mom, Sandy's dad, and it was a host of others that made this place work and made it productive. Now we can turn it into more of a place that is regenerative, and we can give back for all we've taken. So this is a incubation yard. So the maple trees are cut, and that provides your substrate. We introduce a mushroom culture to the logs. Mostly shiitake here, but we also have hericium, oyster, pleurotus, and nameko. Logs stay here for a year, their first summer. The spawn run happens. Some places you can see the mycelium in the end of the log. That means the log's been colonized by the culture of the shiitake. And so there's inoculate, the process of the inoculating of the wood, then it incubates, and then there's an integration process. And I guess of anything, now that Sandy and I are in our sunset years, so to speak, we're looking at how do we integrate better into the community and eventually right here into the forest when we die. Hopefully not today. Some of these are invaders. I've done it too long in one place, so I have these competing mushrooms now that are competing against the shiitake. So we're downsizing a bit. We're still going to do some production for ourselves, more for enjoyment and exercise, and just to keep motion and be in the forest. As I did this through the 20 years, this became my favorite thing to do involving work.